Welcome to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Shuknecht, and today's guest is Cara Alwill. She's the author of Girl Code, Girl on Fire, and several other books, which we will talk about on this episode. So let's get into it. Cara, I am so excited to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I want to start out by just having you introduce yourself and your books. Can't pick one. You have a lot of them, but I'll let you tell us a little bit about that. So go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to chat and get into, I could talk about books all day long. So I'm super excited to be here. My name is Cara Alwill. I am a writer. It's so hard to say what you are, right? But I'm a writer. That's how I started out my career, specifically my entrepreneurial journey. I also coach women. I coach authors. I coach entrepreneurs. I really specialize in helping women tell their stories, really own their voice, tell their stories, and build their brands. So I won't take you through my whole story, but I did start off initially in the music industry. And I did that for a long time. And then the industry shifted and just things were changing in the world. And I moved over to MTV and I was in digital advertising for a while. And I kind of hit a point where I was like, I just can't be in this soul sucking job that's really not, giving me any way to express my creativity. I was sitting in, a really glamorous office in the middle of Times Square, what people think they want and, making six figures and just feeling so just defeated and bored and lonely. And I remember the day specifically, I heard one of my colleagues, he was a salesperson, banging on a door, screaming at the top of his lungs over losing money on a campaign. And I was like, I can't do this. We're not curing cancer here. This is not that serious. And, I started my path to moving on, right, and creating my own business and brand. So to date, I've written 10 books now. I've got a podcast, which I just rebranded, with over 11 million listeners. And I really just champion women who want to create a life that they're inspired by and proud of.
That's amazing. Yes, So I was doing some research for guests for this podcast. You were one of the first that I came across, and I started reading Girl on Fire. And so I was listening to the audiobook and I was driving and I was just yes, just screaming with joy over so much. I have to buy the actual physical copy now because I would underline almost everything in it. I was just, I just loved everything that you were sharing. You were sharing your story. So if people want to hear more about the backstory, in your journey, that is in Girl on Fire, probably in some of your other books as well. But I know you kind of shared your leaving the corporate world, going out on your own. Tell me about just kind of you talked about how you were feeling when you were in the corporate world, but how did you take that leap? And you tell the story a little bit towards the end of the book, but share that with people who haven't heard or haven't read the book yet. Just kind of what made you take that leap and how did you get find the courage to do that?
Yeah. So I was at MTV for 8 years, and 6 out of those 8 years, I was side hustling. I was building the brand. So it started with a blog, and I was, really just telling my stories, just doing what I still do to this day and putting it out there. This was before Instagram, just to give everybody a point of reference. This is when Twitter had just started or it was becoming popular. So 2007, 2008. I mean, it was around before that, but that's when it was really starting to kind of become the way celebrities were on there. I remember it was the first time you could tweet at a celebrity and they would tweet you back. And it was this whole different world was sort of being unlocked. And I was sharing my stories there and on my personal Facebook page, and women were reaching out to me saying, you really helped me through this time. You really gave me hope. You made me feel less alone. And that was really the goal with my writing. But I felt like I wanted to go beyond just telling my stories. I wanted actual tools to help people. I wanted to be able to give people some sort of roadmap to changing their lives. I knew that, what I had done had worked for me, but, I didn't want to tell people how to live my life. I wanted to empower them to live theirs. And I remember very clearly, it was a shower thought, the infamous shower thoughts where you're I have to do this. And I was in the shower before, going to work, and I was like, I can become a life coach. And it was this moment. I had never had a life coach. I didn't really know what they were. I just knew that I had dropped out of college, and the thought of going back to school and getting a master's and becoming a therapist or a social worker just seemed way too daunting. And, I had gone to therapy myself and done so much personal development. So it kind of just seemed like it made sense. So I actually got MTV to pay for my coaching school. So if anyone's in corporate and you have a program, like look into it, ask HR, if they would support you getting a certificate or going back to school to get a degree. They had a program called Intuition at the time. And I convinced my boss to let me take it because at the time I was overseeing a team of 20 people. And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll sign off on it. He didn't really know what I was doing. And I was like, I can use all of these tools and help, and I did. I actually really did apply everything I learned in coaching school to my staff, but I got them to pay for it as long as I passed. And I paid it up front. They reimbursed me. I passed everything. And then I started very slowly building my coaching practice. So it was like one foot in front of the other, like getting the inspired idea, taking action on it, and then following it through, right? Because we can all take action, but like, do we actually take it beyond that one day or that 1 week or even 1 month where we feel inspired? Because it takes time to build anything. So I was taking on clients that I was sharing about my business on Twitter and Facebook. I would take clients at night, get home from work at like, let's say 7:00. I would schedule clients from like, maybe 7:30 to like 9. I would take clients on the weekend. I used all of my personal time. I never took a vacation. I think I took one trip in that whole time. It was like a delayed honeymoon. And I even worked when I was there. So I sacrificed a lot, but it didn't really feel like sacrifice because I loved it. And I knew that I was creating something that was going to give me a path to exit the corporate world. So for anyone listening that really wants to do it, just keep building on what you're creating and like look around to people that have done it. Like that was the biggest thing I think that helped me. I was joining Facebook groups at the time. That was a really big thing. I was joining as many free groups as I could with other entrepreneurs, and I'm friends with a lot of them to this day, which is kind of funny. But I was surrounding myself with people who had done it. And I think, in the way, I don't know if you grew up with this lifestyle, but I grew up with a single mom and she had the one job, that she retired from and she worked her ass off and she did great. But like most of our parents from our generation were like, get that job, get the health insurance, and don't leave a good thing. So I like a lot of that in my head. So I had a lot of people in my life and my family and friends that were concerned. Like my best friend's a teacher. She followed that track. Another best friend is a teacher. So everyone around me was really living kind of the lives that they saw around them. And I was trying to live something that no one else around me had done. So it made it extra hard, but I really just got in those rooms, whether they were virtual or in person. I read all the books I could read. I just did as much research as I could and eventually just kind of charted my path.
Yeah. I think this is why your message in your book stood out to me so much, is because that I feel I just relate with it so much. Like that's exactly what I'm going through right now. And I feel like there's probably so many women who would just I felt like your book is like just like a pep rally. Like I'm just listening to it. I just want to like keep listening. You recorded it yourself, right? It was actually your voice. Yeah. Yeah. And just like, I just want to listen to you. So you have 10 books, you said? Is it 10?
And yeah, so 2 of them are workbooks, but they're books, I still write inside of them. They're not just like a blank journal. So yeah, 10 books. I would say one of them is a poetry book. So 7 full length and then 3, which are the workbooks and the poetry book.
Sure. What was the first one that you sat down to write?
So it's called Sparkle.
Okay.
And it had many names, as you know, from coming from the publishing world. You have this little seed of an idea and it just kind of takes on a life of its own. But it was my vision for that book was my blog brought to life, which in my mind was kind of like Sex in the City, but replace the men with like yourself. Right. So like instead of focusing on dating, it was really focusing on growth and career development and personal development. So it really spoke to that generation, like you and me that watched the show, right? Probably. And I kind of identified with like the fashion and sort of like that living in New York City, because that's where I live, and going out and having cocktails and being social. But, I wanted to appeal to that group of women because I didn't see anybody out there doing it. And I was like, at the time there was like Tony Robbins was like the big life coach, and he still is, but there weren't a lot of people, again, pre-Instagram. So no one was really coaching that I identified with. So the book was really like a guide for women in their, 20s, even 30s, who were trying to really find themselves, but like do it in style and do it in a fun, fresh way that didn't feel like too masculine or just too out of touch.
Yeah. 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 You talk about, I think I don't know if I have this right, but at the end of Girl on Fire, you mentioned like I had $7,000 in my bank account and I sat down at my kitchen table to write the book, right? And I didn't
Yeah.
know which book it was, but
Girl Code.
okay. Oh, that was Girl
Yeah.
Code that you were talking
Yeah.
about. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually reading that one now, so like halfway through that one. So I'm going
That's
to
the
read
one that
all of your
really,
books.
thank you. I appreciate that. Girl Code really put me on the map. That was the book that really took
Yeah.
off. That's the book that wound up landing me. I self-published it, then I got a book deal after, and it kind of just, it's been a whole thing. But yeah, that's the one that I wrote when I left MTV.
Okay. So I'm curious, you have done the self-publishing route and you've done the traditional publishing route then. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what would you tell women who, let's say, you know, somebody who has a message, they want to write a book, whether it's to promote their business or they have, you know, just something that they're passionate about that they want to write a book about. I think a lot of people think they have to go the traditional publishing route to be legitimate. I know that's changed a lot in the last few years, but still there's still that kind of stigma around it. So what would you say to a woman who wants to write a book and you know wants to be discovered from that book? What route should she go or what steps should she take?
I strongly, strongly, strongly believe in the power of self-publishing, especially if you are somebody that really wants to build their own personal brand, that is already on social media, that already has a following. The thing that's changed so much in publishing, and you'll know this, is in the past, publishers would sort of discover an author and really kind of create a world for them, right? Put them on the map, create a career for them, get them their press, help them build their following. That has changed drastically due to social media, technology, online, self-publishing, so many reasons. Now, publishers are coming to authors who already have a platform, or at least a larger platform than they had in the past. So they're coming to authors who have a platform. They're offering them book deals, but ultimately, the way I saw mine was basically a distribution deal. I don't feel like my publisher, and I was with Penguin Random House, they did not do anything for me that I couldn't have done for myself. I got better press on my own. I didn't even have a publicist. This is all organic press. I built my following, right? Though the people that were buying those books were my readers, my followers already. So yeah, sure, I was in airports, but also my self-published books are also in airports now, right? Like a couple of years later, my books are sold in the Harvard bookstore that I self-published, right? Like they, you know, they will guide you in a way. They'll give you an editor, they'll design your cover for you, but ultimately, if you're a self-starter, I highly recommend self-publishing. The timeline is also really different. When you're signing a book deal, you're looking at a good 18 months to 2 years before that book is even on a shelf. And that's at the sign of your contract, which takes months to happen. And I just think that we, as women specifically, really need to harness our own power and stop waiting for somebody to choose us and pick us. And it might look glossy or you might be tied to that traditional idea. I know that I still was at the time when I got my book deal. I was like, I have to do this. It's, you know, I still had that part of me that wanted to be chosen. And I wouldn't go back and change anything because I love that I've been on both sides and I can speak to both sides from an educated and experienced standpoint. But I went back to self-publishing after my book deal. So that tells you kind of where I'm at with all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, every book, every project can be different, but I think, you know, for people who get stuck in the, like, I can't publish this unless it's picked up by a traditional publisher. I just think they're limiting themselves so much. There's so many opportunities out there and you can pave your own way. You can actually make more in your sales, in your royalties.
So much more. I mean, that's, yeah, we didn't even touch on that. I mean, they're keeping the lion's share of the royalty. And for what? You know, if you've built your platform and you're doing all the promotion, it's almost like robbery at a certain point. It doesn't even make sense to me that they keep so much of the royalty. When you're publishing with Amazon, it's like you're keeping like 60%, sometimes more of your sales, and they're printing on demand and they're shipping your book. So when you're self-publishing, you're not like sitting around with like an apartment full of books that you're like putting in envelopes and sending out.
Right.
Like it's so easy these days.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. But it's scary, right? Like it's scary.
Yeah.
You think that like if somebody picks up this book, they're going to do all the work and it's going to, you know, I don't have to do anything and I'm going to be a millionaire, whatever. But the reality is, you know, there's just different routes and not, you know, people can pick what's best for them. And you just don't have to wait to be chosen. I like how you say that.
Yeah.
So for that woman who has that message that she wants to write a book, whether it's, like I've worked with authors who it's like they wrote a book to promote their business, but then also I actually have a guest coming up that Sandy Gerber, she wrote this book, Emotional Magnetism, and hers was like taking this idea and like using that in kind of it's like a leadership tool. Really, really great book, but it had nothing to do with like promoting her business or anything like that. It was just kind of like her thing that her message she wanted to get out there. I think that, and you talk about this in Girl on Fire, that we get stuck, women in particular get stuck in a what ifs, like, or, maybe they want to start their own business, but they're stuck in that what if, like how do I, what if I fail, basically, right? Like, I mean, that's probably the biggest what if this doesn't work? What advice would you give to that woman who is stuck in that what if and not happy, like in her corporate career, or, she knows she can build that bit. She knows she can do something more, but she's just kind of stuck. What's your advice for her?
I think that like, we're the ones that like define failure for ourselves, right? What does failure even mean? Like no one's really paying that much attention. I tell this to all my clients all the time. Like I have clients who are like, oh my God, I want to write this book, but what if it doesn't sell? Or what if I launch this program and it doesn't sell, or start this, store or whatever? I'm like, no one's really keeping tabs on you that closely. And if they are, like, that's kind of a red flag. Like, why? Like no one's looking the way that you think they're looking and judging you. So I think for me, failure is really just when I give up on something. That's how I define a failure. And I never really give up on something unless I intentionally feel like I'm done with that project and I want to move on. And you're still owning that, right? You're still not really failing. You're just choosing to pivot. So much of it is in our perspective. I think I personally would rather try something and have it not work out than always have that thought in my head of like, what if I could have done this? So instead of thinking, what if I fail? I think, what if I never do this thing and it just haunts me forever and I feel badly that I never got to do it? So you really just need to kind of play with your mind and sort of like reprogram the way you look at things. And again, I'm going to go back to community, finding people, coaches, mentors, friends, people who are doing it, who are trying things, quote, failing, moving on, trying the next thing. Because again, when you're around people who are really keep themselves small, you're going to start to pick up that mentality. You're going to start to think, well, oh God, I shouldn't put myself out there. Nobody else is. Like, am I the crazy one? What am I doing? Right. So yeah, just, it's really just completely up to you. And I think that you'll also always find a way. I tell myself that constantly. I'm like, you will always figure it out, even in the worst of times, even when things didn't go the way I wanted them to, or there was a slow month or a slow year, or things, maybe financially weren't looking the way I wanted them to look. I've always bounced back. Like I've never fallen flat on my face. I've never been, broke. I've never been like, my business has never blown up. Like it's never as bad as we think it's going to be. And if you haven't done it yet in business, look to other areas of your life where you've been successful. Look at your corporate job. Look how many times you've been promoted. Look at your education, how you got through school or whatever it is that you did. Like lean into those successes to give you the momentum that you need to move forward with the things you really want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned communities a few times. Do you have any communities you recommend for women? Like you talked about the Facebook groups that you got involved in. Or, do you have specific Facebook groups that you recommend, or like other types of communities online?
I have my own, if I can plug it.
Go for it.
Yeah, no, I started one actually. And it's so funny. I started this in January of 2020. Pre-COVID, not knowing how badly people were going to need it. But I started an online community. It's called the Girl on Fire Collective. And it's priced pretty low. I mean, it's $59 a month, but we do coaching calls every single week. So like every Tuesday at noon, we do a live Zoom call. And I used to call it Ask Me Anything. I had all these different names for it. We used to do themes. Now I just call it Coaching and Conversation, because it's a place where women can all get on the call. And there's usually like 20 or 30 of us live on the call. And people just update us, like update each other or ask a question. It's kind of feels like a mastermind light. It's not as intense because you can float in and out, but it's just a place for people to come and ask for help, right? And share things or be like, oh my God, I launched my podcast, and everyone will run over and download it and leave a review. Like it's just a really tight-knit group of women. And then there's also obviously the coaching aspect for people that need help in their personal lives, professional lives. Other than that, I think get involved locally in your community, like go on meetup.com or, find events that are happening in your area. If you don't have something, start it, put it out there, create something, create like a little coffee meetup, like once a month on Mondays, like find a little, spot to go for lunch, go for walks in your neighborhood and bring other women on board who are like-minded. You don't have to be at a high level to do it. It's really just about forging new relationships. So, create what you wish existed or go become a part of something that you believe in.
I love that. I was not teeing you up for that answer. I did not know about your community, but I'm going to join it because it sounds perfect for me. I know I'm in that transition space of like figuring out what's next. And it sounds amazing to have a group of women that I can, run ideas by or just like learn from. Like that's what I want right now.
It's so great. It's less than the price of a gym membership. That's what I tell people, because a gym membership is like $100 at least a month, right? Pretty much anywhere you go. And it's just so like I don't know. I can't describe the women become friends in the group. Like that's what I love more than anything. I love fostering communities, not just the coaching aspect, but like giving people a place to hire each other, to, become friends, to hold each other accountable. So I'm a huge believer. I would start like 1,000 if I had the time. Like I would have themed groups if I could, but I can't clone myself just yet. So,
well, yeah, and you have a lot going on. I don't know how you do it all based on, everything I've seen. I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, I feel like you've answered this a little bit, but I want to just dig into this a little bit more. So, the idea behind this podcast is, Beyond the Bestseller, that I've worked with authors for 17 years, and some people write a book because they want to sell 1 million copies, right? Like, sure, that exists. But a lot of times in my experience in talking with people about their books is they had a different goal. Like it wasn't necessarily to become a bestseller or to sell 1 million copies. They had a message that they had to get out, right? Like it just is inside and it needs to be released. So, you've talked about your books and so I think I understand some of the purpose behind it, but like what drew you to, what is your mission besides selling those books? Like, what is it that drew you to write 7 different books and have a total of 10 that you have out there? Like, what is that passion that drives you?
There's a couple of reasons. I mean, I love writing. I love the art of writing. I always have. I said from the time I was a little girl, I wanted to be a writer. Like I want to be an author. I want to write books. So I always knew that I loved to write. I think that's where I express myself best, in the written word. But I also wanted to create something that was accessible for almost anyone. I mean, books are like $10 on Amazon. So it feels like something that I can, give to people to consume and to be inspired by, hopefully, and to use in their own lives if maybe they're not ready to invest in coaching yet or a membership yet, right? Maybe they want something where they, maybe they don't even have time to do coaching, or they're just not even there in their journey. They just want to be inspired. It's a way to reach them beyond like the free content that I give everybody through the podcast and social media and all of that. It's also my business card, right? Everybody that is building a brand, like your book it's the new business card. So instead of taking out a card, I tell people, go on Amazon, this is my book, or I give people a copy of the book. One of the things I do, and I wrote about this in Girl Code, I love doing this whenever I travel, I take a copy of my book, and it's Girl on Fire usually, and I stick it in the front seat of the pocket, like on the airplane, and I leave it there. Or I leave it at like a little bar in the airport, or I give it to a flight attendant. I just did that a couple weeks ago. And I love that because it's a way to like show people who I am and what I'm about. And then they can follow me or come do a program with me or just be in my space and learn more, find my podcast. So it's really like a lead generator for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone hadn't read any of your books yet, what book would you recommend they start with?
It really depends on what you are focused on at the moment. I think I'll give like 2 options. If you're in business for yourself or you want to start a business, write a book, do some sort of project professionally, I would read Girl on Fire. If you are a woman that, especially in today's climate or political climate, that really is wanting to feel more confident, wanting to put herself out there, I would read Like She Owns a Place. That is a book that I wrote in 2018. I actually did that book with Penguin. That was my non-self-published book. And it's just all about redefining ourselves as women in terms of age, beauty, everything. It really just kind of helps you figure out that part of yourself that you need to come alive again to be your most confident, like on authentic self.
Yeah. Well, I accidentally started with Girl on Fire, but I think that was the exact right book for me to start with. And like I said, I am going to work my way through all of your books because I loved it. And I feel like any woman who is either, dreaming about going out on their own or is starting their own business, has started it already, or has a passion project like this podcast is my passion project. I want to inspire women through this podcast, using kind of books as that platform to do it. Right. Like we all love to read inspirational books. And so, yeah, I just, I don't know. I love what you're doing. And I love Girl on Fire. I would recommend that for anyone who, dreams of doing something maybe different than what they're doing right now, or, wants to grow something. So Cara, how can people get a hold of you? What is the best place to follow you or learn more about you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm at The Champagne Diet. And my podcast, I actually just renamed it. I'm in a rebranding mode, so it's slowly being rolled out. And my podcast is called Cara Says It All.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to be binging the podcast as well. So
thank you.
Finishing all your books, binging the podcast, joining your community, all the things.
So. That makes me so happy. Thank you. I appreciate it. Sincerely,
well, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Cara, for coming on and being the first guest on Beyond the Bestseller. And I can't wait to get this out there and for people to learn about you and everything you have to teach.
Thank you for having me.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyshuckneck.com